All right, Rabbi, good morning. Good morning. Let us begin. Begin by thanking all of our sponsors, to thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Sivan. Stephen Terry Zin, with gratitude to Hashem for their fifth grandchild, Gavriel Amichai Zin, and memory of Steve's mother, Doris Zin, Devora Basra, B'Yisrael Yoel Zichron Livracha. Sheni and Avram Kelman, in commemoration of the yard site of Avram's father, Rafal Yechiel Ben Avram Zichron Livracha. Our week of learning sponsors, Jeff Schwartz, in commemoration of the first yard site of his father, Shmuel Ben Shimon Halevi Zichron Livracha. And the shir in memory of Tova Rabinowitz, Tova Bas Yoshua Yaakov, Zichron Livracha, sister of Shevi Friedman, and in memory of Adina Zahavi, Adina Basheva Bas Dov Ber Azriel, Zichron Livracha, sister of Yossi Opendin. Our Daf Yomi shir today is sponsored by Aaron Raskis from Florida, with gratitude for the Daf Yomi community and Baruch Hashem in the schos of the Daf. We thank all of our sponsors for dedication, for their generosity. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the neshamas will have an aliyah. Those who need a refuah should have one, together with Kol Choli Yisrael. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should bring back our hostages b'shalom and b'karov, and our soldiers, our precious soldiers, should be zocha to hatzlacha b'chol maaseh yadehem. But so with that, let us begin. We have a lot to do today. Again, a ridiculously amazing daf today. Beautiful. Anything and everything you could ever want out of a blot of Gemara, we have today. We just don't have enough time to get it all done, but in Meretz Hashem, we will, as always, we'll do our best. All right, let's begin. Today's daf is daf ches 8. We are picking up in Meretz Hashem on Zayin Amud 7b at the first wide line, the two dots. Kofin also livnos base sha'ar v'del zachas. So just remember again, our Mishnah transitioned a little bit to a different topic, namely, again, when you live either in a chutzner or you live in a city, what can you be compelled to participate in? Or they'll say, you should just understand the overarching message of this sugya is that when you are part of a community, by definition, you are obligated to engage. It's a very important yisod, a very important Musar Haskell, and in terms of arvos, in terms of what it means to be a responsible community member. You live in a community, you live in a chatzar, you are part of a kehila, you're obligated to participate in whatever it is that is happening, to the point that halacha could even compel your participation. So, kofin also livnos beishar talas chatzar. So we force the residents of the chatzar to go ahead and participate in building of the gatehouse, the door for the chatzar. So Tanya, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, local chatzeros ro'iyos lebeis shar. Not every chatzar, not every courtyard requires a guardhouse. Rather again, Beis Shar really is a gatehouse. Rather again, we're talking about over here a chatzar that is next to a Rishus HaRabim, which makes sense because since there's such pedestrian traffic, you need something to keep the public out of the chatzar. The Gemara says, I'm sorry. So a chatzar that's next to Rishus HaRabim needs a gatehouse. One that is not next to Rishus HaRabim doesn't need a gatehouse for Rabbanon. The Rabbanon will say, Zimnin dedechiki b'nei Rishus HaRabim v'aylu v'asu. The Rabbanon will say, no, even a chatzar that's not next to Rishus HaRabim should have a gatehouse. Why? Sometimes there's a lot of traffic in Rishus HaRabim. Pedestrian traffic will spill in a little bit more and go to chatzeros that are not even right next to Rishus HaRabim. Okay, kolfanosa livnos liyer. So we'll say, so remember again, the Mishnah then went through that if you live in a city, there are certain, we'll call it city fixtures, that you're obligated to participate in. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Shmuel Silber says, not every city needs a wall. So Rabbi Shmuel says like this, a city that is on the border, a border city requires a wall. A non-border city doesn't require a wall for Rabbanon. Zimnin de mikru va'asu gaisi. The Rabbanon will say sometimes the enemy attacks even a little bit further into the land, and therefore even non-border cities require walls. So we'll say this is very interesting. In a city, let's say again they're collecting for a wall. How do you create an assessment? So we'll say this is very interesting. So obviously, when you say kofin, right? When we say that, let's go with this idea that residents of a city have to pay towards a wall. That means it's a city-wide assessment. So the shaila is, how are you conducting the assessment? It's actually very interesting. Lefi nefashos, it's just like a number thing. In other words, there are 1,000 residents of the city. Take the cost of the wall divided by 1,000. or maybe not. Maybe it's a wealth-based assessment. Depending on household income, that's how we divide up the cost of the wall. A fascinating question. Amar le lefi mamon govin. So this is interesting. So they asked this question, right? So Rabbi Lazar asked this question to Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan responds, and he says, this is a financial assessment. We look at household income, and based on that, we will assess how much each family has to go ahead and pay towards the wall. And then again, Rabbi Yochanan says, Elazar, my son, literally again, fix this ruling in place with nails. In other words, this is the halacha, and make sure no one deviates from it. Ike da Amir, an alternate version of this. Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Yochanan asked a different question. Kishen govin lefi kiruv batim hein govin odim lefi mamon. So the others say there was a different question. When they do the assessment for the wall, Rabbi says, interesting, is the assessment based on the position of your home? In other words, that we assume that homes closer to the edge of the city need the wall more than homes towards the interior of the city. So do we assess it based on need? Whoever's closest to the edge of the city pays more. More interior you are, the less you pay. Or no, lefi mamon and govin. Or at the end of the day, we assess it based on wealth. Rabbi Yochanan responded, lefi kiruv batim hein govin. We assess the wall based on location to the edge of the city. Elazar b'ni kavua b'im mismar. So Elazar, my son, literally affix this ruling with nails. In other words, this is the halacha. Don't let anyone deviate from it. Incredible. Let's go back to Rabbi Yehuda Nisiya. So we'll say, so again, the point over here is the Gemara. So first version, Rabbi Yochanan saying that the assessment is based on finances. In other words, the amount of the wall is levied upon the residents of the family, but it's not an equal distribution of the expense. But rather, again, it's a relative assessment relative to the income of the particular home. And according to the second approach, really the assessment is based on location of your home. The closer you are to the edge of the city, the more you pay. The more interior you come, the less you pay. Okay, Rabbi Yehuda Nisiya, Rama Deshura Adrabanan. So we'll say this is a great Gemara. We actually referenced these Gemaras on Shavuos night, as you'll see in just a moment. Rabbi Yehuda Nisiya assessed Rama Deshura Adrabanan. So look, Rashi says over here, Hitel Yitzias Chomas Ha'ir Ala Chachamim Kima Shabani Adam. So we'll say, so Rabbi Yehuda felt that the Rabbanim had to pay towards the assessment for the security wall. Right, so this is all around the city. We're assessing all of the residents. The Rabbanim, the Talmidei Chachamim, have to pay towards this as well. Amar Reish Lakish, Rabbanon lo tzrichi netirusa. Incredible. Reish Lakish says, Rabbanim, Talmidei Chachamim don't need security. Or in other words, they don't need the security provided by this wall. We're going to see their Torah, their mitzvahs provide them their security. Therefore, Reish Lakish was positing that you should not assess Talmidei Chachamim ultimately again for this security wall. Where do we get this from? This because the pasuk says, "Asaprei michol yirbim." I will count them, and they will be even more numerous than the sand. So the Gemara says, "Asaprei laman." Who are we counting over here? If they were talking about that we're counting the tzaddikim, so I don't understand. Are we saying that the tzaddikim are more numerous than the sand? If Klal Yisrael is compared to the sand, so the tzaddikim are going to be more than the sand, that doesn't make sense. This is what it means to say. It's beautiful both say. So when I count the deeds of the righteous are more numerous than the sand of the shore. And I was saying, I watched this. So the sand, which is relatively a small amount, right? A small amount of sand, yet protects from the sea. And as I always say, remember the shore creates a border to ensure that the waters don't overrun and overtake the earth. So the way we look at the shoreline, the way we look at the sand, is that it protects the world from the water. So the Gemara says, so too Maseim Shel Tzadikim Shem Merubin L'Kol Shekein Shemaginim Aleihem. All the more so, the deeds of the righteous, which are more than the sand of the sea, certainly protect them from any misfortune. We'll say a very beautiful drasha. Just as the sand goes ahead and protects the world from the waters of the ocean, so too again the deeds of the tzaddikim protect them from any from any harm or from any difficulty. So we'll say, so therefore again, Reish Lakish was positing, you can't assess Talmidei Chachamim for the wall. Why not? Talmidei Chachamim don't need the wall. They don't need it. They don't need it. So let everyone else in the city pay for the wall. Talmidei Chachamim should be exempt from that expense. Ki asla kamid Rabbi Yochanan amar lei, my time alotim lameha. Why don't you go ahead and learn it out from here? Beautiful Gemara as well. Ani choma v'shadai kemigdalos. So I will say, so Shalom Alech writes in Koheles that literally translated, I am like a wall. V'shadai, shadaim are breasts, and the shadaim are migdalos, are like towers. So the Gemara says, what does this mean? Ani choma. What does it mean, I am a wall? Zu Torah. This refers to Torah. Right? Torah is the protective fence. This Shaddai Kemigdalos. What does it mean that the Shaddayim are like towers? Top of Ches, Elu Talmidei Chachamim. These are like the Talmidei Chachamim. So we'll say this is actually quite beautiful. So we'll say, I'll just point out something interesting. What's the connection between Talmidei Chacham and Shaddayim? What's that connection? So it's actually interesting that Rabbeinu Gershom, who's in the margin of the Gemara over here, so that he writes on Zayin Amud Beis, he says so beautifully, V'shadai k'migdalos edel Talmidei Chacham shalomdim zemizeh ketinok yonek mishtei imo. Just like the baby nurses from its mother, Talmidei Chachamim nurse, so to speak. They learn from one another. As I was saying, we often think that what makes a Talmid Chacham great is the knowledge that he acquires on his own. That's part of what makes him great. The other part that makes a Talmid Chacham great is the willingness to learn from another. Talmidei Chacham recognize that every single person has so much to give, especially fellow Torah scholars. So therefore, again, the Talmidei Chacham are compared to Shaddai. Rabbeinu Gershom says, just like the baby nurses from the mother, Talmidei Chacham nurse knowledge, so to speak, from one another as well. Reish Lakish savar kidarsh Rava. Reish Lakish darshans this pasuk like Rava darshans, Ani choma, I am a wall, zu knesses Yisrael. This refers to Klal Yisrael. V'shadai kemigdalos, my shadaim are like towers. Elu bate knessos o bate midrashos. So we'll say this is so beautiful. So in other words, Rava learned out. Rava doesn't use this pasuk to speak about the fact that Talmidei Chachamim are protected, because he uses it for a different drasha. He says, Ani choma, I am a wall. That's Klal Yisrael. What does it mean? Shadayim are like towers. That refers to shuls and batei midrashos. So I will say, so I'll just point out something so beautiful about this. What does it mean that Klal Yisrael is the wall? What does that mean? So I will say, this is so incredibly important. When there is achdus in Klal Yisrael, when there is achdus, then Klal Yisrael is a wall. Then we are protected from our enemies. When Klal Yisrael is not ba'achdus, when we are not in a state of unity, we are like an unprotected city, chas v'shalom. We're like an unprotected country. So we see this all the time. What does it mean? Shadayim, migdalos, batikneos, midrashos. So we'll say this is so beautiful as well. If you go to Rabbeinu Gershom, we'll say, where do we receive our nourishment from? Where do we receive our nourishment from? What are the shadayim, so to speak, of Klal Yisrael? It's our shuls and our batei medrash. It's where we come to learn together. It's where we come to grow together. It's where we come to be nourished together. Let's say all of Shas is worsted for a Gemara like that. The Choma Klal Yisrael is together. We are an impenetrable wall. And what are the Shaddayim of our people? From where do we nurse our spiritual nutrition? From our shuls, from our batei medrash. Those are the things that bring us together. Those are the things that sustain us. Incredible. Rav Nachman bar Rav Chisda. So much to say in each of these Gemaras, but okay. Rav Nachman bar Rav Chisda assessed a tax. Karga is usually defined as a head tax on the Rabbanim. So we'll say. So I just want to point out over here. From here you see this concept already being introduced. Reish Lakish introducing this idea that you don't tax Talmidei Chachamim. So I don't know. Maybe this is like the precursor for like a parsonage, but this is specifically security tax. Right? So security tax for Rabbanim, Chachamim, Talmidei Chachamim have their own security. Their personal security is generated from their Meisim Tovim, and therefore they need not share in the security assessment of the city. Rav Nachman bar Rav Chisda, Rav Mekagar Rabbanon. So Rav Nachman bar Rav Chisda assessed the head tax on the Rabbanim. Amali Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Avarta Adaraisa, Vadinevi, Vadiksuvi. Okay, so Rav Nachman. So what happens? So Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak says to him. So remember again, this is Rav Nachman Bar Rav Chisda is the one who assessed the tax, and Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak said to him, by the way, by assessing the Rabbanim, you've been in violation of a daraisa, right? Nevi'im and Ksuvim. All right, let's go through this. A daraisa d'chsev. What's the daraisa? Af chovav amim kol kidoshav yadecha. So it says this is quite beautiful. So what does it mean? Af. So literally again, even though you love the nations, kol kidoshav yadecha, your holy ones are in your hands. What does this mean? Amar Moshe lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ribono shel olam. So Moshe said to Hashem the following: Ribono shel Master of the universe. Afilu b'shah she'atem mechaviv amim. Even at times when you favor the nations. Now, we'll say favoring the nations means even at times when you give the nations of the world shlita, autonomy, and control over Klal Yisrael, kol kidoshav yu bi'adecha. Your holy ones are in your hands. What does this mean? Veheim tuk. So, in other words, you go ahead and you protect the tzaddikim. See, when the rest of Klal Yisrael is in peril, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you afford protection to the tzaddikim. Veheim tukul raglecha. They will sit at your feet. Tani Rav Yosef elo tamidei chachamim shemekasasim ragleihem meir leir or medina lemedina lilmod Torah. This refers to tamidei chachamim who literally again pound their feet, stamp their feet, going from city to city, country to country to learn Torah. So what does that mean? They go city to city, country to country to learn your words. To learn your words. So therefore, we'll say, what do you see from here? You see from this pasuk that HaKadosh Baruch Hu protects the righteous. Even when Klal Yisrael is given over to the nations of the world, HaKadosh Baruch Hu protects the righteous. Therefore what? Therefore the tzaddikim do not need to pay towards the security taxes of the city. Adinavi, what about the Nevi'im? Dichsev gam ki yitnu bagoyim ata akabtseim v'yachelu me'at mimasa melach v'sarim. So we'll say, so again, so Amar Ula says, pasuk zeh belashon aramis ne'emar. This pasuk can be interpreted in Aramaic. Itanu kulu ata akabtseim v'ma'at mehem yachalu mimasa melach v'sarim. So this is actually very beautiful. The way we translate this pasuk is as follows. So if everyone learns Torah, ultimately HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I will gather you up from the exile. And if not everyone learns Torah, so mehem yachalu mimasa melach v'sarim. Some of them will be spared from the burden of the king. So again, what is this a reference to? Tamidei chachamim, who steep themselves in Torah, will be freed ultimately from the tax burdens of the place in which they live. Therefore, again, once again, a raya, Talmidei Chachamim don't have to share in the taxes. Ad ksuvi dichsiv. So what about ksuvim? Menade below v'halach lo shalit lemir ma'aleim. Vam Rav Yehuda. So what does this pasuk mean? Menade zu menas hamelach. So menade refers to the tax of the king. So balu zu kesef gulgalta. This refers ultimately again to tax. V'halach zu arnona. So Rashi defines over here as Minas Melech is Magvas Masim Shematilan Tamar al Bnei Medina. So like a federal tax, a national tax. Arnona is Isurei Tevuos Behemos Midei Shana B'Shana, is a tax on wheat and a tax on livestock. Okay, so different taxes. I will say, so the point over here that he was saying is, you see from each of these, you have a pasuk from the Torah, from the Nevi'im and Ksuvim, all highlighting this idea that Talmidei Chachamim are really exempted from taxes. Rapapa Rama Karya Charata Yasmi. So this is a very interesting discussion over here. So I'll say, so again, so this kind of, so the first part of this discussion is that Talmidei Chachamim, just to follow the progression, right? Our Mishnah said that when you live in a city, everyone shares in the cost of the wall. The Gemara comes along and says, everyone doesn't mean everyone. Who's exempt? Talmidei Chachamim. Talmidei Chachamim are exempt ultimately, again, from participating. Why? Talmidei Chachamim do not need security because the Torah provides their security. Okay, we referenced this a lot in our Shavuos topic. A lot more to say on this Gemara, both halachically and ashkafically, but let's move weiter. Rav Papa Rama Kari Acharat Yasmin. So it's a very interesting case over here. Rav Papa was living in a city, and they were digging a well for water, a water well, and so we'll say, so this is also one of these things where everyone in the city shares in the cost of digging the well. Rav Papa even imposed an amount on the Yisomim, on orphans. Maybe you won't find water. maybe you won't find water. Now this is an interesting idea. Now what's the issue if you don't find water? Rashi says over Lo yimtzu b'mayim be'ifsadetem chinam v'yasmi la b'nei mechila ninu delechlu. Maybe you're not going to find water, and therefore it turns out that you took water from the Yisomim. You took money from the Yisomim, and again, for nothing. For nothing. So the Gemara, listen to this. Amarlei mishkal shakina minayu. I'm taking money from them. If we get water, then I'll pay it back. I'm sorry. If we get water, then great. If we don't get water, then I'll refund their money. I'm Rabbi Yehuda. Now, obviously, that's not for all the townspeople. That's just for the Yisomim, right? This was a special arrangement for orphans. I'm Rabbi Yehuda. Hakol le'egle gapa filu miyasmin. So I will say everyone has to go ahead and pay for the walls of the city, even Yisomim. Everybody pays for this. Avar Rabbanan lo tzrichin netirusa. Tamidei Chachamim don't need protection. Now what this means is Tamidei Chachamim need protection, but their Torah gives them their protection. They don't need the wall. Hakol lekarya pasya filo merabanan. Everyone pays for karya pasya. I say, what's karya pasya? Rashi says over here, chafiras bar lishtos mayim. Ultimately, again, digging for wells. Everyone needs to pay for the cost of wells, water wells. Okay? Even the Rabbanan. V'lo amru ela delo nafku ba'achluza. Aval nafki ba'achluza Rabbanan lav b'nei mefak ba'achluza nenu. So here's what's interesting. In general, historically, there are two ways that they dug wells. So method one was they'd hire someone. So if you hire someone, right? Method two is that the townspeople themselves participate in the digging of the well. So this is something very interesting. If halach l'maaseh they're hiring someone, all the residents of the city have to pay towards the hire of the workers, even Talmidei Chachamim. But if they're going out and actually performing the manual labor themselves, Talmidei Chacham Rabbanim are exempt from participating and sharing in the manual labor. Apparently, again, it was considered to be beneath their dignity for the Talmidei Chachamim to participate in the manual labor. So if they're digging it themselves, Talmidei Chachamim are exempt from that. Very interesting. Okay, so let's go back to an incredible story over here. Rebbe, Pasach Otzros B'Sheni B'Tzuros. So this is very interesting. So Rebbe, fine. So Rebbe opened up the storehouses of food during a famine. Amar yikansu bali mikro bali mishnu bali gimara bali halacha bali haggadah aval ame haaretz al yikansu. So I'll say, so this is fascinating. So you open up the storehouses, and here's what he said: anyone who's learning Torah, Chumash, Mishnah, Gemara, Halacha, Agarata, could come and take food. Ami haaretz, ignorant people, are not allowed to take food. Okay, so I'll have to see exactly what this means. So the Gemara says, so I'll say, well, let me tell you what this means. In the Shulchan Aruch brings down, I'll say that when you have limited resources, there are ways in which you give out those resources. For example, I'll say, just to show you something very interesting, the Shulchan Aruch brings down that, let's say, for example, Kohanim are entitled to resources before Leviim, and Leviim before Yisraelim. There's a hierarchy in the way that you distribute resources. In that same way, the Shulchan Aruch, I will say, this is actually brought down the Shulchan Aruch in Yeridea, Siman Reish Nun Aleph Sif Yud Aleph, and the Gemara says as follows. Well, we'll see this in just a moment. That ultimately a Talmid Chacham comes before an Am Haaretz for resources. Talmid Chacham. Now, we'll say, I just want to point out over here that the Shulchan Aruch is very clear that if we're talking about a situation where there's limited resources and you're giving out resources. Now, if an Am Haaretz is dying in front of you and needs resources, you give it to him. And Shulchan Aruch is explicitly clear in that. He says, "Avalim ba lefaninu meis berav." If the Am Haaretz Chas v'Shalom is coming along and dying, right? He needs something right now. The halacha is chayiv lachyoso. Of course, you give him what he needs. So this is just talking about, again, an allocation of resources. We're giving out that the Talmidei Chachamim have hierarchy over an Am Haaretz. But again, we're gonna further build this out. This sounds a little shocking to the system at first, but we're gonna build this out a little bit more. Okay, so I'll say what happened. Dachak Rabbi Yonasan ben Amram. So Rabbi Yonasan ben Amram pushed his way in there. V'nichnas. So we'll say now, there's a piece of the story here that the Gemara doesn't say explicitly. Rabbi Yonasan ben Amram, who was the Talmud of Rebbe, He was Rebbe's Talmud. He disguised himself, looking like an Amma Aretz. I don't know how you dress up as an Amma Aretz. Whatever. Put on a, what do they call when people don't bend the visor of their hat? Yeah, maybe that's okay. All right, whatever. Anyway, all right, so the mice again. So I don't know. Maybe that's an I don't know. Whatever. So what happens? He went ahead and he dressed up as an Amma Aretz. Okay. B'nichnas Amarlo Rabbi Parnasani. So the point over here is that again his Rebbe doesn't even recognize him. He says, Amarlo Rabbi Parnasani, Rebbe, I need food. So Amarlo B'ni Karisa, have you learned Chumash? Amar le lav. Nope. Shanisa, have you learned Mishnah? Amar le lav. In came ma'afarnasacha. If that's the case, then why should I support you? So it was beautiful. Amar le parnasini kekelev ukeorev kekelev koorev. He said, Rabbi, support me at least like a raven, like a dog. What does this mean? So Rashi points out over here that these are animals that are often supported by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? They're animals, they're scavenger animals. And yet HaKadosh Baruch Hu always makes sure that they have what they need. V'rachamav al kol ma'asav. The Ribono Shel Olam's compassion is upon all of his creations. So at the end of the day, so you see over here, Rabbi Yonasan saying to Rabbi, if HaKadosh Baruch Hu has compassion upon all of his creations, then how do you not act in the same way? So this is very beautiful. So what happened? So the Gemara says, Basra dinafak. So he went. So Rabbi ended up giving him food. Then they gave him food. So Yossi Basra dinafak after Rabbi Yonasan ben Amram. So remember again. Rabbi doesn't know that it's Rabbi Yonasan ben Amram. So after he left, Yosef Rabbi v'kamet star. Rabbi was upset. Va'amar ayli shenasati piti la'ama aretz. Woe to me that I've given my bread to an ama aretz. Okay, we'll see. So Rabbi was upset. Sounds like Rabbi Yonasan makes a very compelling argument. Just like Hashem supports all of his creations, so too Rabbi, stop with the rationing of resources. Give to any yid who shows up in front of you and help him out, and comes along. And meanwhile, afterwards, Rabbi was upset that halacha l'maisa, he had shared of his bread with this Amma Aretz. So afterwards, I'm going to follow Rabbi Shimon bar Rabbi. Shema Yonasan ben Amram Tamid Chahu. Shena Rotze Lehanos Mekava Torah Miyamav. So afterwards, they said to Rabbi Shimon bar Rabbi said, maybe that guy was actually your Talmud Yonasan ben Amram. So apparently Yonasan ben Amram had a reputation that he never wanted to benefit from his status as a Talmud Chacham. So maybe he's coming in disguising himself as an Amma Aretz, benefiting from, he didn't want to benefit from Kavod Torah. So Badku v'ashkach, so they sure enough, they checked afterwards and they saw Rabbi, he can't swakol. So they found that it was Rabbi Yonasan ben Amram. Afterwards, Rabbi said, you know what, everyone should come in to collect food. So we'll say, so this is a very interesting story. So afterwards, why does Rabbi say let everyone come in to collect food? So what's interesting is, it's not a result of the fact that Rabbi necessarily changed his position. That's not really what it is. Rather, again, what changed over here is that Rebbe felt that other Talmidei Chachamim might act in the same way, disguise themselves as Amei Haaretz, and ultimately, again, not want to go ahead and utilize their status as Talmidei Chachamim. Therefore, Talmidei Chachamim would lose out on the resources that they were really entitled to, and therefore he said, let everyone come in. Now, I will say, the shaila is what's going on over here? What is this? So I'll just say, first of all, just to focus on this phrase, Basra denafek Yosef Rebbe v'kamet star. After Rabbi Yonasan left, Rebbe was upset. Why was Rebbe upset? She says, "Oili shenasate piti la'ama aretz." Woe to me that I've given my bread to an ama aretz. It's just a strange lashon. So I will say, so I saw actually beautiful, brought down the name of the Baal Shem Tov, who says as follows, that really what Rebbe was saying was like this: Oili shalolimarati oso Torah. Va'az yachal hayalios tamid chacham ulekabel pito bischos. That ultimately, again, what Rebbe was saying was like this: if there's an Amma Aretz that exists, I will say, who has responsibility for Amei Haaretz? Whose responsibility is that? So Rebbe says, it's the Talmidei Chachamim's responsibility. At the end of the day, I will say, again, if there are Jews who don't know, whose responsibility is that to make sure that they know? it's upon the knowledgeable ones, it's upon Talmidei Chachamim to not keep their Torah to themselves, but rather to take their Torah and to go ahead and share it with others. So what Rebbe was really lamenting, was ultimately at the end of the day, how could it be that there are Amei Ha'aretz? If there are Amei Ha'aretz, it means that I, Rebbe, am not doing my job. That was his tsar. That's what he was upset about. At the end of the day, I was looking at it as it's their responsibility that they are Amei Ha'aretz, and that's true. It's shared responsibility. I will say, but if there are Amei Ha'aretz, it's also the responsibility of the Torah community to ensure that ultimately Vayafutzu Ma'anasecha Chutza, that ultimately Torah is shared with everyone. That's what Rebbe was upset about. How could it be that I have fallen short of my responsibilities in not educating the masses? And I will say now, with that explanation, the next part of the Gemara makes a lot of sense. Rebbe L'Tamei. Rebbe goes according to his reasoning. What does Rebbe say? Dam Rebbe. Ein paranos bal the olam ela b'shil amei aretz. Rebbe said that ultimately suffering only comes upon this world only because of amei haaretz. Only because of Jews who are unknowledgeable, who don't know. Kehu damikli. Let's suppose the Gemara tells a story, like there was a story of a crown, the Shadu at Tiberia. So one time Rashi points out the emperor commissioned the people of Tiberia to pay for a new crown. So Rebbe came along, and the townspeople said to Rebbe that the Talmidei Chachamim should have to share in the cost of the crown. Amar lahu, lo. Rebbe said, no, Talmidei Chachamim don't have to share in this. Aruknin. So they said to Rebbe, well, if you don't share in it, we are going to leave this city. We're going to flee. The common people, the Amei Ha'aretz, are going to flee this city, and there's going to be no choice but to share in the burden. Amarle Aruko. Rebbe says, run away. So Arku Palgeon. So what happens? So half of the residents of Tiberia went ahead and ran away. So what happened? So interestingly enough, Dalyua Palga. For some inexplicable reason, the emperor, the Caesar, went ahead and lopped off half of the amount due for the crown. Okay, Asu Anu Palga, the remaining half of the residents of the city came before Rebbe. The Talmidei Chacham should have to share in the financial responsibility. Rebbe said, absolutely not. Arukinon, we're going to run away. So Aruko, Rebbe said, run away. So Aruko Kulu. So now essentially, everyone vacated the city of Tiberia. Pash Hahu Koves. So ultimately, one guy, a launderer remained behind. Shaju Akoves. So they levied, the Caesar, the emperor, levied the entire amount on this one remaining guy. Aruk Koves, the launderer ran away. Paka Kalilan, for some inexplicable reason, they lifted the levy from the people of Tiberia. So we'll say, point over here is Amarabi Reisem She'in Paranas Bali Olam Ela B'Shil Amei Ha'aretz. What do you see from here? That suffering only comes upon the world because of Amei Ha'aretz. Now we'll say, so I just want to point out over here once again, with the Baal Shem Tov's explanation, it makes a lot of sense. What does it mean that ultimately suffering comes upon the world only because of Amei Ha'aretz? It seems to be a very unfair statement. Right, that says all suffering comes because of Amei Ha'aretz. So part of the lesson obviously is that, again, sometimes a person doesn't know they're an Amei Ha'aretz. But once I know that I'm an Amei Ha'aretz, that it is incumbent upon me to fix my situation. So it could very well be that part of what the Gemara's Yisod is like this. If you know that something in life is broken, and you don't fix it, so there's culpability for that. Sometimes I don't know that something's broken. So you don't know what you don't know. If something's broken, I don't know that it's broken. If I'm broken and I don't know that I'm broken, there can't be responsibility for that. But if I know that I'm broken, I know that I'm an Amei Ha'aretz. And again, I will say it's not just Amaratzis. I know that there are other parts of my life that are in a state of disrepair. Then there's culpability for being broken and remaining broken. So you hear this dichotomy. If I don't know that I'm broken, so at the end of the day I can't be responsible for that. But once I know that I'm broken, once there are elements of my life that are broken and I don't take any steps to repair them, there is culpability and there is liability for that. So again, extending it to the Baal Shem Tov, for the rest of us, if I know that there are Amei Ha'aretz, and I don't do anything to open my home, to open my life, to share my Torah with those who don't know, then there is collective responsibility for that. That's a lack of achdus. That's a lack of national achrayus. That's a lack of cohesion. And again, the Baal Shem Tov is that same, going back to, right, when is Klal Yisrael strong? Ani choma, when there's achdus. How does achdus manifest itself? A care and concern for one another. So if I have Torah and there's someone else who doesn't, then I have to figure out some way, somehow, to be able to share that with someone. Failure to share, ultimately, again, says the Gemara, creates paranos, creates suffering for Klal Yisrael. Incredible, incredible. Let's go weiter. So we'll say, how long does one have to live in a city and ultimately, again, be like the members of the city? How long, right? So how long do you have to reside in the city in order to go ahead and be responsible like the people of the city? Or minus, remember again, so the Mishnah said 12 months. But remember, it's the kasher minhu. Or mini, hachameres v'hagameles ha'overes imakom l'makom v'lona b'socha. So it's an interesting case over here. A donkey driver or a camel driver who are passing through a city, and they remained inside the city. Literally, again, they stayed over in the city, and what happens? V'hutcha iman. They were enticed to worship Avodah Zarah with the residents of the city. So remember again, when you have a situation like this of an entire city that worships Avodah Zarah, this is called the Ir Nidachas. The entire city and all the possessions of the city are wiped out. So let's say you have a guy traveling through, and he ends up worshiping Avodah Zarah with the entire city. What's the halacha? So the Gemara says, Hein b'skila umamonam pala. So we'll say the halacha is that these individuals are punished by skila, right? Punished with skila, like general individuals who go ahead and worship Avodah Zarah, but their property is not destroyed. But if they remain in the city for 30 days, then ultimately, again, they're killed by the sword, like the rest of the residents of the Ir Nidachas, and their property is destroyed. What do you see from here? That at what point do you become a resident of the city? After 30 days, not after a year. So the Gemara says, Amarav lo kashya, halubnei masa, haliyasuve masa. So I will say this is very interesting. There's a difference between being a citizen of a place and a resident of a place. A citizen, ultimately, again, you become after 12 months. A resident, you become even after 30 days. Kidisanya, hamudra haname anshia'ir, if a person goes in and makes a neder, not to get benefit from the people of the city, then what's the halacha? Kol shenishta sham 12 chodesh asli hanasimenu. If halacha lemaisa, you've been there for 12 months, you can't get hana. Pachos mikan, less than 12 months, mutter. Ultimately, again, it is permitted. If on the other hand, you make a neder not to get benefit, ultimately from those who dwell in the city, any person who's dwelled in the city for 30 days, you can't get benefit from. Less than that, you can go ahead and get benefit. I will say, ultimately, again, do you require ultimately 12 months to be for everything? So the Gemara says, "V'hatanya," we learned shloshim yom l'tamchui. So this is very interesting. So we'll say, so now we're talking about when you live in a city, you become entitled to certain tzedakah benefits after a certain amount of time. So for example, once you live in a city, ultimately after 30 days, you're entitled to a tamchoy. We'll say tamchoy was like a soup kitchen, right? So you were entitled to get to. In other words, it's interesting. So you live in a city for 30 days, tamchoy. Shlosha chadashim lekupa. 3 months. 3 months you could collect from the kupa. This was another form of tzedakah. Shisha leksos. After 6 months, you're entitled to take from the clothing gemach. Tisha lekavura. After 9 months, again, you would be able to, if a person dies in the city after living there for 9 months, they could participate in we'll call it the paupers, burial society. They'd bury people for free. Shneim asar lepasei. After living there for 12 months, you have to go ahead and participate. Pasei literally means the security of the city, right? The wall of the city, infrastructure. So I'll say, what do you see from here? That you could be considered a resident of the city even earlier than 12 months for certain things. And you're right. You're right. When the Mishnah said that you become a resident of the city after 12 months, that was talking about for security. For security, right? That's why for pasei, for literally the boards or the walls of the infrastructure of the city. Okay, incredible. Everyone contributes towards the wall of the city. Afilu miyasmi, even from Yisomim, aval Rabbanon lo, but Tamidei Chachamim ultimately not. The Rabbanon lo tzricha netirusa. Tamidei Chachamim don't require protection from the wall because their Torah protects them. Amra Papa l'shura u'leparsha u'letarzina afilu miyasmi. So if you look at Rashi, Rashi defines these things over here. The Shura Tikkun HaChoma, fixing the wall. Parsha, ultimately again, is like the watchman, security guard, who goes around the city. And Tarzina, this is the guy who watches the arsenal, right? Every city had like a weapons storehouse. So he watches the arsenal. For all of these people, every single resident has to collect, or for all these needs, every resident has to contribute. Afilu miyasmi, even ultimately again, Yisom, but Talmidei Chacham don't have to contribute towards this. Why? Because ultimately, again, Talmidei Chachamim don't require personal security. Their security comes from their Torah, so they're not assessed for any of these security taxes. The klal is anything that the residents of the city benefit from, even Yisomim have to pay for. Rabba Rami Tzedakah Yasmi. The Bay Bar Merion. So I'll say, interestingly enough, Rabbah made a tzedakah assessment from the Yisomim of Bar Merion, the house of Bar Merion. In poskim tzedakah Yisomim. So we'll say, remember again, we're not talking about this now, but for example, there are tzedakah assessments as well. Now, generally, we don't make tzedakah assessments against Yisomim. So what's interesting is Rabbah went ahead and made a tzedakah assessment from the Yisomim of Bar Merion. So the Gemara says, but yet they said, but we don't do that. Afilu piyon shvuyim, even for the redemption of captives. Amarlei la'achshavinhu ka'avidna. So it's interesting. Rabbah said, I did this in order to maintain their elevated family status. Bar Merion was a very important family, and the family that gave a lot of tzedakah. So interestingly enough, so Rabbah apparently did this in order to maintain the standing of the family. That's why he did the tzedakah assessment. Okay, we'll say a story. Ifra Hormuz, Ima de Shavar Malka. So Ifra Hormuz, that was her name. She was the mother of King Shapur. We spoke about him at the end of Bab Metzia. Right? See, he was the mother of King Shapur. So Shadra Arnika, not Jewish, Shadra Arnika de Dinar, the coming to Rabbi Yosef. So she sent a lot of money, a bag of money to Rabbi Yosef. Amra lehavi mitzvah Rabbi. She said to Rabbi Yosef, use this for an important mitzvah. So Rabbi Yosef, but my mitzvah Rabbi. Rabbi Yosef says, okay, so obviously, here's what's interesting is she wasn't just telling him use it for a mitzvah. She said to him use it for an important, a great mitzvah. He's trying to figure out. So I don't know what in Yiddishkeit is considered to be a great mitzvah. So the fact that we just had the statement that we do not assess tzedakah on Yisomim even for pidyon shvuyim, even for the redemption of captives. What does that show you? Shmamina amud beis shmamina pidyon shvuyim mitzvah rabahi. So we'll say the fact that it uses that lashon of afilu pidyon shvuyim. What does that tell you? That pidyon shvuyim, redemption of captives, is a very important mitzvah. Amar le Rava le Rabba bar Mari. So Rabba said to Rabba bar Mari, Minah hamilsa de Amar Rabbanon. From where is this concept that the Rabbanon say? The Pidyon Shvuyim mitzvah Rabbahi. Where do we know that Pidyon Shvuyim, redemption of captives, is an incredibly important mitzvah? Amar le dichsev v'haya ki yomru elecha ana neitze. So this is a very profound Gemara. Quoting the pasuk from Yirmiyahu HaNavi. So they said to Yirmiyahu HaNavi, "Vaya ki yomer elecha ana neitze." So they say to Yirmiyahu, so you're going to ask me, where are you going? When we are exiled after the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, where are we going to go? Va'amart alem, you will say unto them, K'amar Hashem, this is what Hashem said, Asher lamaves lamaves. Those who will go to death, now both say mavis in this context means like death of natural causes. Those who will die of natural causes will die of natural causes. Those that will die by violence, by sword, will die by sword. Those who will die by famine will die by famine. And those who will go to captivity will go to captivity. Rabbi Yochanan says, so we'll say this pasuk is a foreshadow for what will happen to Klal Yisrael upon the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. So Rabbi Yochanan says, the later you are in the pasuk, right? The later you are in the pasuk goes from the most severe, from the less severe to the most severe. He says, for example, Cherev kasha mimaves. So we'll say dying by sword is more difficult than dying by natural causes. Why? So we'll say either the fact that maves, natural causes, is listed first, so death by sword is listed second. The other possibility is svara. Svara, ha kamanavel, ha lo kamanavel. So we'll say, so ultimately again, when a person dies by sword, so literally again, there's some disfigurement, the Gemara says. Death by natural causes, ultimately there's no disfigurement. Other possibilities of pasuk. Yakar beinei Hashem hamafsa lachasidav. So ultimately, again, it is precious in the eyes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, mafsa lachasidav. So you see over here that there's a preciousness that is associated with death by natural causes. Ra'av kasha mecharev, famine is worse than the sword. Dying of famine is worse than the sword. So high kametstar, high low kametstar. So we'll say, so dying by the sword could be an instant death. Dying by famine is a prolonged death. Tovim hayu chalale cherev mechalale rab. Or we'll say the pasuk that literally again, it is pasuk literally says it is better to die by sword than it is to die by famine. And the Gemara in Zahar will say such a profound Gemara. Shevi kashem ekulam. Captivity is worse than everything. Why? Tekulu isnehubei. Because we'll say all of the previous elements of maves, cherev, and ra'av, all right, of death by natural causes, death by the sword, and death by starvation, all find themselves in captivity. What does this mean, Rabbi say? Take a look at Rashi. First Rashi in the daf. Shevi bekulu isnubei shubiyat hakum, because you have Jews in the hands of non-Jews. Lansos bo kol chaftso, and the captors could do whatever they want. Im lamos, im lecherev, im l'rav. Whether people die in captivity because of natural causes, whether people die in captivity because of violence, whether people die in captivity ultimately because of famine. I will say, just what an overwhelming Gemara to learn, especially as more than 100 of our brothers and sisters actively languish in captivity as we go ahead and we learn this Gemara. And I will say, when you think about it again, this is the pain of captivity. The pain of shvuyim, the pain of knowing that there are Jewish captives is the pain of not knowing what their fate is, of not knowing what it is that's happening to them. Are they alive? Are they chas v'shalom not alive? Is there starvation? Is there abuse? And I'll say, this is the pain. I just want to point out the tragedy of our people, is that the dynamics that we contend with today are no different than the dynamics that we contended with thousands of years ago. The condition of Klal Yisrael today, in other words, the plight of Klal Yisrael today, is the same plight as the time of Yirmiyahu HaNavi. This idea of abuse at the hands of the nations of the world. But this idea that literally again, that there are Jews, that are precious men, women, and children who are actively being held captive. Now, as we sit here and we learn this Gemara, and once again the world turns a blind eye, the world turns a deaf ear. And I will say, but we don't. We've learned long ago that we do not wait for the world to care about us. Rather, what we do is we circle the wagons. This all goes back to ani choma. It all goes back to the need, ultimately again, for us to be there for one another, to learn Torah with one another, to take care of one another. Because when we are together, when there is achdus, when we are biyachad, then there's a choma, then there's the strength of a unified Klal Yisrael, and halavai, in the schus of that unity, in the schus of Torah with each other, sharing our resources with one another, being there for one another, and Meretz Hashem our Shvuim should come home b'shalom and b'karav. So let's go back to Tanah Banon. Kupa shel tzedakah, nigvis b'shetnaim, u'mischalekes b'shlosha. So we'll say a very interesting case over here. Literally again, the kupa shel tzedakah is ultimately again, so when you are collecting for tzedakah, so it can be collected with two people, and ultimately, again, it is dispersed with three people. So collected by two, dispersed with three. So the Gemara says, Nigvis b'shnayim. Why do you have to collect it with two people? She'ein osim sraros al tzibur pachos mishnayim. We'll say in general, we're going to see that when it comes to what we'll call srara is literally matters of authority. Matters of authority are never conducted with less than two people. And ultimately, again, it's divided, it's given out with no less than three people. Why kedinei mamanas? Because it's like a beis din. It's like a beis din, right? You have a beis din that disperses the money, and therefore, halacha l'maisa, you have to give it out with three. So the Gemara says, Tamchui is the soup kitchen. So remember again, I will say they would collect food. Tamchui nigvis b'shlosha. You collect the food with three people. Ultimately, again, and you disperse it with 3 people as well. Like a Beis Din. I was supposed to say, you have to determine who gets and who doesn't get. Next, shegivuya, v'chaluka shavim. Literally, again, the collection and disbursement is the same. Tamchui b'chol yom. The Tamchui, the soup kitchen is open every single day. Kupa me'erev Shabbos, erev Shabbos. The kupa, which is another form of tzedakah, was once a week. Tamchui la'aniyei olam. Tamchui was given to anyone. Anyone who showed up at the kitchen, soup kitchen, was given food. Kupa la'aniyei ha'ir. The kupa, however, was only dispersed to the aniyim of that particular city. V'rashoim b'nei ha'ir lasos kupa. V'rashoim b'nei ha'ir lasos kupa tamchui v'tamchui kupa. That was saying the residents of the city have the right to determine what their various or how their various tzedakah apparatuses will work. And they have the ability to go ahead and literally change it for whatever they want. So the idea is, if you want your tamchui to only give out once a week, but you want your kupa to go ahead and give out every day, you could do that. You could do that. Similarly, again, I'll say the residents of the city have the right to dictate weights, measures, and wages. Ulasiya al kitzasan, and to go ahead and fine people for non-compliance with different facets of the city. Okay, Aramar, so we said you can conduct yourself in matters of authority. So that's what it's calling it, matters of authority. And I will say now quite literally what that means is like this. That in other words, so we saw this before, matters of authority sounds like you're collecting things from the community. You can't do that with less than 2 people. Where do you know this from? So we'll say it's very interesting, this is by the Mishkan. By the Mishkan. So the Lashon over here is when they were collecting the Zav, this is Vehem, they, plural. So it sounds like that whenever there's a collection should not be done with less than 2 people. So the Gemara says, Sraros hudelo avdi, ha hemune mehemen. So ultimately, again, you shouldn't conduct yourself in matters of authority, but yet it sounds like, again, from a credibility perspective, even less than 2 is fine. So the Gemara says, Rabbi once appointed 2 brothers. I will say now 2 brothers are essentially like 1 person. Why? Because since they can't testify about each other, right, therefore it's like 1 person. So Rabbi appointed 2 brothers to oversee the kuba. So it's interesting. The collection itself has to be done with at least 2 people, but Lamai said the administration of it could even be with 1 person. My srarusa. So we'll say, what is srarus? What does it mean authority over here? So we'll say, since when it comes to tzedakah, it's actually very interesting, you are allowed to seize collateral. I was supposed to say, remember, being part of a city means there are assessments. So for a tzedakah assessment, you're even allowed to seize collateral for someone to satisfy their tzedakah assessment. You could even seize collateral even on Erev Shabbos. What's the chiddush of Erev Shabbos? You would think like this. The Gabbai tzedakah goes over to somebody and says, listen, pay your share. And the guy says, listen, I will, but it's Erev Shabbos, I'm very busy. So I thought, okay, that's a pretty good excuse. People are busy on Erev Shabbos. Kamashlan, even on Erev Shabbos, you could seize collateral for a tzedakah assessment. Is that true? Ini Vaksiv, I will say first white line. Vaksiv, Pakarat Yako, Lochatzav, Amar Yitzchak Bar Shmuel Bar Meretz Mishnei Drapapa, Vafila Gabbai tzedakah, Lokashia Hada Amit Hada Lo Amit. So I will say, so remember again, everything, when it comes to these tzedakah assessments, everything depends on whether or not a person has. So in other words, if a person is wealthy and they have money, then the Gabbai tzedakah is allowed to assess them and seize collateral. If a person is not wealthy, doesn't have money, then you can't seize money from a person or collateral from a person who doesn't have the ability to pay. Kiha, Dirava Achpei Rab Nasan Bar Ami V'Shakal Mine Arba Me'azuzi L'Tzedakah. As Rava forced Rav Nasan Bar Ami, right, literally, and he compelled him to pay 400 zuz to tzedakah, which Rava said was an incredible amount of money, but obviously, now that is one good Gabbai tzedakah, right, but he understood that Rav Nachman had the money, and therefore he compelled him to pay it. The Hamaskilim Yizaru Kizoh Harakia, so it's beautiful. Literally, again, the ones who understand, the Maskilim are the wise ones, they will shine it like the Zohar Harakia. Zed Dayan Shadan Din Emes Lamito. This refers to a judge who adjudicates the halacha properly, and literally again from the righteous ones, they will be like the stars that endure forever. Elu gabayit tzedakah. These refers to the people who collect tzedakah. So I will say it's quite beautiful that ultimately again that matzdiki harabim, those who give benefit to the rabbim, are called the gabbai tzedakah. Rabbi says it's an incredible idea. We often think that the people who collect people collect tzedakah, so those are the people receiving the benefit. It's actually interesting how the Gemara refers to gabbai tzedakah as matzdiki harabim. Those are the ones who give benefit to the masses and ultimately go ahead and give benefit to the masses and ultimately go ahead and enable other people to have suah. So Rabbi, have to stop over here. Sorry, it's already time. We'll stopping mid-sentence. Incredible Gemara, incredible Gemara today. Shkoyach. More ahead of us over the next 2 days. Incredible. Schos. Sunday schedule tomorrow. Yeah, Mirza, I'll put it out. Good morning.
אני פגשתי את הרב לפני כמה שנים, כן אפשר לפגוש את הרב ל3-4 דקות.
אני מחויב